In 1975, Tom Jones was earning around $100,000 every single week performing in Las Vegas. He was one of the biggest names in entertainment, filling rooms night after night. But by October of that year, something went terribly wrong. During one performance, he could not even finish a single song. The crowd began to boo during Delilah, and the noise never stopped. It grew louder and crueler with every passing moment. Security eventually stepped in and pulled him off the stage in the middle of the show while the audience cheered as if they had won a prize. For Tom Jones, it felt like public humiliation on the largest stage possible. After that night, he disappeared from view for 6 months. He stayed inside his mansion, chain-smoking cigarettes, replaying recordings of that performance over and over again. He told his manager that it felt like the end of everything he had worked for. But the truth was, that night was not the real cause of his collapse. It was only the moment when years of excess, pressure, and personal destruction finally caught up with him. Behind the scenes were hundreds of affairs each year, a private room reserved for groupies, and the devastating moment when his wife finally learned the full truth and left him after a violent confrontation that left him injured and broken. Tom Jones was born Thomas John Woodward on June 7, 1940, in Pontypridd, Wales. From the very start, life was difficult. He grew up at 57, Kingsland Terrace, a small and cramped house located in the heart of the Rhondda Valley coal fields. The air was always filled with coal dust and smoke. His father worked long, exhausting 12-hour shifts deep underground in the mines. He came home tired, covered in grime, and barely earned enough money to keep food on the table. Inside the house, there was very little space. Young Tom shared a bed with his siblings and wore clothes passed down from others. Coal dust from his father's work clothes often fell onto the floor. Money was always tight, and comfort was something he only heard about in stories. It was not part of his daily life. In 1952, when Tom was just 12 years old, everything suddenly stopped. Doctors found a dark spot on his left lung and diagnosed him with tuberculosis. At that time, tuberculosis was terrifying in Britain, often leading to long hospital stays or death. Fear filled the house. Luckily, his case was not contagious, so instead of being sent away, he was confined to his bedroom at home. For 2 full years, from 1952 to 1954, his entire world became that single room. He could not attend school, play outside, or even walk freely down the street. The windows were kept open for fresh air, even during cold winters, and he stayed warm under piles of blankets while the fire burned low. While other boys ran and played, he watched life pass by through the glass. Those years were incredibly lonely, but they also changed him in ways he would not understand until much later. During the first year of his illness, doctors told him he was not allowed to sing. For a boy who already loved music, this felt especially cruel. Still, he found other ways to connect with it. Late at night, he listened to BBC radio, absorbing American blues and rhythm and blues music. Voices like Big Bill Broonzy sank deep into him. In 1952, his mother bought a television, one of the first in their neighborhood. It became another window to music, performance, and the world beyond his room. When he was not listening or watching, he drew. He used India ink to sketch what he could see from his window and imagine himself performing on stage. When doctors finally allowed him to sing again, his voice had changed. The illness had deepened it, made it rougher and stronger. It became the powerful baritone that people would later recognize instantly. He would later describe it as a strange gift, strength that came from weakness. Lying in bed night after night, Tom made a quiet promise to himself. He told himself that once he could walk outside again and reach the lamp post down the street, he would never complain about life. School, however, was never a place where he felt comfortable. Reading was difficult, and writing felt almost impossible. Teachers called him lazy, unaware that he struggled with dyslexia, something that was not properly understood at the time. By the time it was recognized in his early teens, the damage had already been done. He had emotionally given up on school. Music was the only thing that made sense to him. He sang hymns at school, performed at family gatherings, and found confidence in those moments. Sports did not interest him, but making people laugh by copying Elvis Presley's hip movements did. Those small moments of attention gave him something school never could, a feeling that he was good at something. By the age of 14, he was sneaking into local pubs around Pontypridd, standing in dark corners and singing Hank Williams songs for tips. It was risky and sometimes dangerous, but it gave him pocket money and a sense of freedom. One Christmas, he earned more money singing alone than groups of children did caroling together. The pubs were filled with rough faces and hard lives, and they taught him how to command a room. At 16, he left school completely and took whatever work he could find. He carried bricks as a construction laborer, sold vacuum cleaners door to door, and accepted any job that paid. His first steady wage was just $2 a week in 1955, barely enough to survive. Still, at night, he sang. Living with exhaustion and hope at the same time became normal for him. Around this period, life forced him to grow up even faster. He had met Melinda Trenchard when they were both 12 years old, and by 16, she was pregnant. They married quietly on March 2, 1957, at the Pontypridd Registry Office. 5 months later, on April 11, their son Mark was born. Tom was only 17, and Linda was just 16. Suddenly, he was a husband and a father with no safety net. To support his family, he took a job at a rubber factory in Treforest, gluing belts during long 12-hour shifts in heat and poor air. He came home exhausted, then went back out to sing at night. Factory workers like him earned only $2 to $3 a week, and it was never enough. He slept only a few hours at a time, driven by fear and responsibility. His health suffered, but quitting was not an option. In 1958, he formed his first band, Tommy Scott and the Senators, playing rockabilly covers in smoky halls across Wales. They built a local reputation, but being far from London made progress slow. In 1960, a serious car accident left him injured and unable to work for months. With no income and growing debt, depression set in. Mental health was not something people discussed openly then, so he carried it quietly and leaned heavily on Linda for support. When he recovered, something inside him hardened. He knew factory life could never be his future. Linda stood by him through everything. She sewed his stage outfits from scraps of fabric and kept the family together. As his confidence grew, attention from women followed, and tension entered their marriage early. He admitted even then that temptation was a struggle for him, but Linda chose to stay, believing in him and protecting their family. Everything changed in 1963. Tom, still known as Tommy Woodward, was performing with his band at a youth club in Pontypridd when Gordon Mills walked in. Mills was a former boxer trying to break into the music business, and the moment he heard Tom sing, he was stunned. He decided immediately to become his manager. He renamed the band, borrowed an old van, and drove Tom to London, promising him a future far beyond Wales. On January 1, 1964, Mills secured him a recording session with Decca Records. The song Chills and Fever impressed executives but failed on the charts. Some felt his style was too bold, too sexual, too much. Mills refused to give up. He rebranded Tommy as Tom Jones, inspired by a popular film, and reshaped his image into a sharp-suited performer. On November 11, 1964, everything finally came together. Tom recorded It's Not Unusual in a rushed session after another singer backed out. Near the end of the song, he added a spontaneous woo, which completely changed its energy. Pirate radio stations loved it, and Decca responded to the growing demand. In early 1965, the song reached #1 in the UK. By March, it had climbed into the top 10 on the US Billboard chart. Within months, it sold over 1 million copies worldwide. The speed of his success shocked everyone. Decca rushed to press more records as orders poured in from Europe and North America. Suddenly, Tom Jones was no longer a modest Welsh singer. He was a global sensation, and the spotlight became intense. In April 1965, he appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show, watched by 28 million Americans. For many viewers, it was their first time seeing his energetic stage presence and bold hip movements. Some conservative viewers were shocked, while others were instantly hooked. Unlike many British pop acts of the time, Tom Jones looked wild and fearless, as if daring the audience to keep up. Within 6 months, his life had completely transformed, setting a new standard for how quickly an artist could rise from local fame to global stardom. Later in 1965, composer Burt Bacharach personally chose him to sing the theme song for the film What's New Pussycat. The recording session at Abbey Road was chaotic, with 5 pianos playing at once and nothing lining up properly. Instead of fixing the chaos, Bacharach embraced it, and that raw energy became the song's sound. The track reached number 11 in the UK and boosted Tom's popularity in the United States. In 1966, he received a Grammy nomination for Best New Artist. Ironically, Tom did not like the song at first, believing it was too light for his deep voice. Bacharach insisted it would become iconic, and he was right. In 1966, Tom released Green Green Grass of Home, which stayed at number 1 on the UK charts for 7 weeks. It outsold the original version by a huge margin. The song's story of a prisoner reflecting before execution deeply moved listeners. Tom's emotional delivery was so powerful that radio stations received calls from people asking if he was actually in prison. By the end of that year, he had sold over 3 million singles worldwide. The song proved that emotional storytelling could dominate the pop charts. By 1967, Las Vegas came calling. Tom began headlining at the Flamingo Hotel, earning $25,000 a week, an incredible amount at the time. Audiences were wild, often throwing underwear onto the stage. Security had to escort him out after shows. He befriended Frank Sinatra, who told him to own the stage completely. That summer, Tom performed 22 sold-out shows at the Flamingo, breaking records for a non-American act. The Las Vegas version of Tom Jones became a legend in itself. In 1968, he released Delilah, inspired by a real-life crime involving jealousy and murder. The song reached number 2 in the UK and sold over 2 million copies worldwide. During a performance on BBC's Top of the Pops, Tom smashed a guitar on stage in a moment of raw emotion, shocking viewers and fueling media attention. The story behind the song haunted him, and he performed it with intense emotion for years. By 1969, Tom Jones was more than a touring singer. He became a weekly presence in millions of homes with his television show This Is Tom Jones, which aired on ABC and attracted up to 20 million viewers per episode. His rise from a sick child in a coal mining town to an international superstar was extraordinary, but behind the success were personal struggles that would eventually bring him to his breaking point. The guest list on his television show was filled with some of the biggest legends in music, including Aretha Franklin, the Bee Gees, Janis Joplin, and Johnny Cash. Having artists like that appear alongside him only pushed his popularity even higher. Album sales in the United States reached platinum levels, and reports claimed that Lou Grade paid him around $9 million per series. The show fully embraced who Tom Jones had become by that point. It focused on his huge personality, his powerful stage presence, his wild energy, backup dancers, bold choreography, and flashy costumes. It was not just about singing songs anymore. The program ran until 1971 and helped cement him as more than just a hitmaker. He was now seen as a complete entertainer, the kind of performer who could carry an entire show on his shoulders. With that level of influence, he started thinking bigger than just his own career. In 1970, Tom Jones and his manager Gordon Mills launched their own record label called MAM Records. They signed several artists, including Gilbert O'Sullivan. Still, the biggest success under the label came from Tom himself. In 1971, his song She's a Lady reached number 2 on the UK charts. The song was written by Paul Anka after watching Jones perform in Las Vegas. Anka was inspired by Tom's smooth confidence, his seductive stage movements, and the way he could completely control an audience. MAM Records developed a reputation for bold signings and loud promotion, and for a short time, it felt like Jones and Mills were not just managing a career, but running a powerful entertainment machine. However, the same nights in Las Vegas that boosted his fame also fueled his growing reputation for excess. People began paying as much attention to his personal life as they did to his music. Between 1972 and 1974, his Las Vegas career reached another level. He was reportedly earning $100,000 a week at Caesar's Palace, making him one of the highest-paid performers of his time. He partied with Elvis Presley, who even gifted him a custom robe. Their long nights of drinking and gambling turned into stories people repeated for years, almost like myths. There were poker games, endless champagne, and conversations that only happen in the early hours of the morning when no one wants the night to end. On stage, his shows were built around intense energy and strong sexual tension. Fans threw underwear onto the stage, and some even tossed room keys. Tom later admitted that the lifestyle was intoxicating and deeply tempting. Once that kind of attention and excess takes hold, it becomes difficult to focus on anything else. The fame, the applause, and the constant excitement slowly took control. By 1976, his music was still finding an audience, but his image was starting to change. His song Say You'll Stay Until Tomorrow became his last top 20 hit in the United States, peaking at number 15. Behind the scenes, his reputation grew darker. He was known for sleeping with as many as 250 groupies a year and often used a special room at venues just for private encounters. The tabloids picked up on these stories and printed every detail they could find. There were tales of women competing with each other backstage, trying to get his attention. The scandals damaged his marriage and kept rumors alive. Tom did not apologize publicly. He said he was simply living the rock and roll dream, even if it cost him privacy. But fans who once saw him as a glamorous and charming star began to view him as a symbol of extreme excess from the 1970s. In 1977, he made a move that seemed like an attempt at reinvention, but it came with consequences. He moved his family to Los Angeles and bought Dean Martin's former mansion in Bel Air, which reportedly cost around $1 million. One reason for the move was to avoid high taxes in the UK. He also built a recording studio in the house. However, the change in location did not calm his personal life. His wife Linda continued to clash with him over his open affairs. One of the most famous was his relationship with Miss World winner Marjorie Wallace. The affair lasted 3 years and became a media frenzy. People who witnessed it described the relationship as intense, and newspapers followed every expensive date and painful breakup. What was meant to be a fresh start in Los Angeles turned into another chapter of chaos. His image as a devoted family man fell apart even further. Then came the night that made everything impossible to ignore. On October 27, 1975, Tom Jones walked onto the stage at the Las Vegas Hilton wearing a sequin jumpsuit. He introduced a new ballad called Darlin' to a crowd of more than 2,000 fans. The audience was not interested in hearing new material. Almost immediately, the mood turned ugly. People began booing and shouting insults. Some yelled, "Go home, Tommy." Drinks were thrown toward the stage. Security had to step in and physically escort him off while he was still singing. He left the stage soaked in sweat and completely stunned, as the crowd roared with anger. The reaction was not just about the song or the outfit. Rumors about his personal life were spreading fast, including stories about a private room for groupies at his shows. Those whispers had started turning admiration into disgust. One woman even shouted about his betrayal of his Welsh roots, blending his background with the scandal as if it were all one act of dishonesty. The humiliation hit him hard. He canceled all performances for the next 6 months. He withdrew to his home in Los Angeles, smoked constantly, and watched recordings of that disastrous night over and over again. He told Gordon Mills that it felt like the end of everything he had built. The deeper reason for his reaction was already there. By 1975, tabloids were openly discussing his groupie lifestyle and constant infidelity, and fans were hearing all of it. The affair that caused the most damage was still his relationship with Marjorie Wallace. In December 1973, she was only 19 years old and had just been crowned Miss World when she met Tom in his dressing room at the London Palladium. Their relationship became public after they were photographed kissing on a beach in Barbados during a Miss World television event in 1974. This broke her contract, and she lost her crown on March 7, 1974. The situation became even more tragic when her fiancé, American race car driver Peter Revson, died in a crash later that same year. The press tied everything together into one long and painful story. By the time the Vegas audience turned on Tom in 1975, it was not random. It was the result of years of excess finally catching up with him. The 6-month break that followed was more than just time away from work. It marked a major turning point. The public humiliation mixed with rumors, and those rumors mixed with the truth he had hidden for decades about the scale of his affairs. One of the most painful moments came when Linda learned the full truth about the Marjorie Wallace affair. She reacted with anger and heartbreak, striking him hard enough to leave him bleeding and shaken. The image he had tried to protect for so long, the charming star, the safe idol, the perfect entertainer, cracked not only in public but also in his private life. By 1987, Tom Jones was reaching a point where many people saw him as a reminder of the past rather than a current star. Then something unexpected happened. A new song found its way onto the charts and reached number 2 in the UK. It mattered even more because Tom was 47 years old and desperately needed to feel relevant again. The song was connected to a Welsh television show called Matador and was written by Mike Leander and Eddie Seago. Around the same time, his longtime manager Gordon Mills passed away in 1986. Tom's son Mark stepped in and took over management duties. Mark's involvement helped turn the release into a real moment rather than just another song. You could hear the difference in Tom's television performances, including one memorable appearance in Spain. His voice did not sound worn out. It sounded older in a strong way, shaped by experience and hardship. That single did not just give him chart success. It gave him a reason to continue. When 1988 arrived, Tom made a move that should not have worked, but somehow did. He teamed up with the electronic group The Art of Noise to record a synth-heavy cover of Prince's song Kiss. The track was loud, strange, and fearless. That was exactly why it worked. The song reached number 5 in the UK and went to number 1 in New Zealand and Spain. Suddenly, Tom Jones was back in the spotlight and even appearing regularly on MTV. The music video became popular and won the MTV Breakthrough Video Award. People were especially impressed by how modern the video looked, using visual effects that stood out at the time. What shocked audiences most was the contrast. Here was a singer known for classic, soulful power, now performing over electronic beats and still sounding completely like himself. It proved that he could move with the times without losing his identity. However, even during this comeback, his personal life continued to cause trouble. In October 1987, while on tour in the United States, he had an affair with model Catherine Berkery. The relationship resulted in a pregnancy and later turned into a legal battle over child support. In 1989, a DNA test confirmed that Tom was the father of her son, Jonathan Berkery. Despite this, Tom refused to acknowledge the child and denied it publicly for years. Judge Judith Scheindlin ordered him to pay financial support, reported to be over $30,000 a year, along with education and legal costs. The situation became a public spectacle because it clashed so strongly with his smooth and confident public image. Even as he continued performing and releasing music, the damage remained in the background. He released the album Move Closer in 1989, which included dance tracks and pop covers and carried forward the success of Kiss. Still, the scandal followed him for years. It was not until 2008 that he finally admitted the truth and described the situation as a painful scar from his excesses during the 1980s. Even then, he stated that he had no desire to meet Jonathan, a detail that made the admission feel cold rather than healing. After all the noise and controversy, his next phase was quieter. In 1991, he worked with Van Morrison on the album Carrying a Torch. The project focused on jazz standards and ballads, with the title track written by Morrison himself. The sound was calmer and more controlled, and critics noticed the maturity in his voice. It was not a major chart success, but it strengthened his reputation as a serious and versatile artist in a new way. On January 1, 1994, Tom Jones released his 33rd studio album, The the lead, and how to swing it, and once again showed that he had no interest in playing it safe. Instead of leaning on nostalgia, he aimed straight for modern dance pop sounds. He worked with major producers like Trevor Horn and Teddy Riley, people known for shaping contemporary hits. The single If I Only Knew reached number 11 on the UK singles chart, while I Want to Get Back With You featured Tori Amos and added another layer of credibility. The album itself reached number 55 in the UK, climbed to number 19 in Australia, and surprisingly hit number 1 in Finland. Critics were divided on the project, but the message behind it was obvious. Tom Jones refused to slow down or stay trapped in the past. That constant refusal to stand still was exactly what set the stage for his biggest comeback just a few years later. Everything exploded in 1999. On September 9th of that year, he released Reload, an album that became the most commercially successful of his entire career. It went 6 times platinum in the UK and sold more than 4 million copies worldwide. Reload was built around high-energy collaborations and bold duets, and it made Tom Jones feel like a pop culture event again rather than a legacy act. Sex Bomb, recorded with Mousse T, became a massive hit and reached number 3 on the UK singles chart. Mama Told Me Not to Come, performed with Stereophonics, kept the momentum going. In total, 5 singles from Reload entered the UK Top 40, a rare achievement that reshaped how a whole new generation viewed him. Suddenly, younger audiences were discovering him not as a memory, but as someone current and exciting. That same year, on December 31, 1999, he was awarded an OBE for services to music. It was a formal recognition of decades of influence and success. A few years later, on March 29, 2006, at the age of 65, he was knighted by Queen Elizabeth II at Buckingham Palace and officially became Sir Tom Jones. During that period, he even performed Delilah for the royal family. While tabloids continued to cling to the old image of him as a wild playboy, the honors did not erase the stories. Instead, they placed an official stamp on his legacy despite them. The later stage of his career became something unusual, blending warmth, resilience, and survival. In 2002, Tom faced a major health crisis when doctors diagnosed him with aggressive lung cancer linked to decades of heavy smoking. They found that it had spread to his liver and spine. The situation was serious, but he went through treatment, rested his voice, and kept moving forward. In 2010, at 70 years old, he released Praise and Blame, a gospel-influenced album that reflected the church music he had grown up singing. It showed a quieter, more reflective side of him. Even at that age, he was still finding new ways to use his voice and express himself. In 2012, at 72, he joined The Voice UK as a judge. The show quickly became a hit, pulling in peak audiences of nearly 10 million viewers. Tom Jones stood out not just because of his fame, but because of his calm, supportive presence. He came across as wise and trustworthy, more like a mentor than a distant legend. The role introduced him to yet another generation and softened his public image in a way few expected. Behind all of this success, his personal life carried a long and complicated history. He married his childhood sweetheart, Linda Trenchard, in 1957 when he was 17 and she was 16. Their marriage lasted 59 years, until Linda passed away from leukemia in 2016 at the age of 75. Their only child, Mark, was born the same year they married, and after Gordon Mills died in 1986, Mark became deeply involved in managing Tom's career. Linda remained by Tom's side through decades of chaos, fame, and scandal. One quote often linked to her summed up her strength and loyalty. She reportedly said, "I knew, but he came home." Tom and Mark also had their share of tension, especially as Mark learned more about the affairs that had surrounded his father's career. Stories involving Miss World Marjorie Wallace in 1973 and alleged affairs with singers like Mary Wilson created strain between them. That tension eventually led to family therapy and, later, reconciliation. Over time, Mark became the person shaping Tom's Las Vegas shows and guiding his later career decisions. Some of the old stories still read like dramatic scenes from a movie. There were claims that Tom had a secret 2-year affair with Mary Wilson that began in 1968 and turned into scandal in 1974. Stories circulated about service elevators in Las Vegas and a confrontation in Bournemouth where Linda reportedly smashed a hotel mirror and confronted him with words that stayed with him forever. The Marjorie Wallace affair also remained infamous, with photographs taken at Caesar's Palace and a confrontation at a London party where Linda allegedly punched Tom and shouted that he had ruined everything. Tom later said that in those moments, he simply stood there and took it. One of the heaviest allegations came in 1978 from Cassandra Peterson, who later became famous as Elvira. She claimed she was 17 when she was brought to his dressing room in Las Vegas and that she needed stitches afterward, while Tom was 38 at the time. Stories like these cast a long shadow. They made the charm and confidence he showed on stage feel like a mask, and they became impossible to separate from his public image. After Linda's death in 2016, the glamorous lifestyle finally began to shrink. Tom sold their Los Angeles mansion, valued at around $6.5 million, because the memories there were too painful. He moved to a flat in London, a place Linda had wanted during her final years. He spoke openly about talking to photographs of her and shared the words she left him with before she died. She told him to keep performing and not to grieve alone. That promise became something he held on to. Over time, the emotional weight began to show physically as well. In 2022, he collapsed on stage from exhaustion, a moment that felt like grief turning into something his body could no longer hide. By 2025, at 85 years old, his life had grown quieter again. He lived a mostly private life in London, mentored young artists through video calls, and chose his public appearances carefully. In a BBC interview, he admitted that fame had come at a heavy cost, saying it meant losing pieces of himself. Still, he continued to perform, because performing was the promise he kept returning to, the thread that had carried him from a coal mining town in Wales to stages around the world and through every rise, fall, and reinvention along the way.